Tonight, on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, the guest was supposed to be Martin Scorsese, a cinematic legend whose films have shaped American culture for decades. But no one, not the producers, not the audience, not even Colbert himself, was prepared for what would unfold. Stephen Colbert was sitting at his desk, adjusting his tie, as the taping was about to begin. His crew buzzed behind the scenes, checking timing and jokes. Scorsese was set to talk about his new documentary on the history of American television, a topic that promised to be safe, yet engaging. Still, there was a strange tension in the air. Colbert, known for his sharp wit and ability to walk the line between levity and provocation, seemed slightly uneasy tonight. Just last week, his show had been heavily criticized by conservative media for a joke about a political campaign, and social media was still simmering. For viewers over 55, who valued Colbert's intelligent humor but were often skeptical of his political jabs, this was a moment of reckoning. Martin Scorsese entered the studio a few minutes before the taping. His gray hair was neatly combed, but his eyes betrayed a sense of fatigue. At 82, he was still razor-sharp, though increasingly irritated by modern culture, from fleeting trends to talk shows that, in his view, had reduced art to the level of tweets. He had agreed to an interview with Colbert out of respect for his intellect, but deep down, he expected another round of predictable jokes. "Martin, great to see you." Colbert stood up, extending his hand. His smile was genuine, but his voice carried a hint of caution. "Likewise, Stephen," Scorsese replied, his Brooklyn accent breaking through even in those short words. He sat in the guest chair, glancing around the studio. The bright lights, the laughter from the warm-up comic, it all seemed a little artificial to him. The fanfare sounded, and the show began. Colbert launched into his trademark monologue, joking about politics, the weather, and the new season of a reality show. The audience laughed, but Scorsese sat stone-faced. The rituals, the need to entertain at all costs, it all grated on him. When Colbert finally introduced him, the crowd erupted in applause. Martin raised a hand in mild greeting, but his smile was restrained. "So Martin, your new film is about television. Why now?" Colbert began, holding his question cards. "Television's not what it used to be, right? These days, it's all about streaming and TikTok." Scorsese nodded, but his gaze sharpened. "Television has always been a mirror of society, Stephen. It shows us who we are, the good and the bad. But today," he paused, as if weighing his words, "today it's often just noise. People talk, but no one listens." Colbert jumped in, trying to keep the mood light. "Noise? Well, we make a little noise here, but I hope it's the good kind." The audience laughed, but Scorsese didn't follow suit. "That's not what I mean," he said, his voice firmer. "I mean that television has lost its soul. It's become—" He hesitated, searching for the word, crap. The room froze. Colbert blinked, his smile frozen. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged panic glances. The word crap on a CBS late-night show? This wasn't just a slip, it was a scandal. For the over 55 audience watching at home, the word might have felt offensive not just for its bluntness, but because it struck a nerve, their nostalgia for the golden age of television. Colbert tried to diffuse the situation. "Whoa, Martin, you're not holding back." He laughed, but it came out nervously. "Maybe tell us what you mean by that. Give us a chance to redeem ourselves." But Scorsese didn't back down. He leaned forward, his eyes burning. "I'm saying we've stopped telling stories that matter. You, Stephen, you make a show people love, but even you have to play by these rules, the jokes, the applause, the ads. All for ratings. Where's the space for truth?" The audience, initially silent, began whispering among themselves. Some clapped, supporting Scorsese, while others looked uncomfortable. Colbert felt the ground shifting beneath him. This was his show, his domain, but Scorsese, with all his weight and authority, was suddenly questioning everything he had built over the years. "Martin, I get where you're coming from," Colbert said, trying to regain control. "But television is entertainment. People come to us to relax, to laugh. Is that really such a bad thing?" "It is," Scorsese snapped, when we're afraid to say something meaningful. We're scared to offend, scared to lose sponsors. I saw the criticism you got for a political joke. And what did you do? You carried on, but more carefully. Why? Because no one wants the truth. The audience burst into applause, louder this time. Colbert felt sweat bead on his temples. He was a master of improvisation, but now he faced a choice: escalate the conflict or try to smooth it over. He chose the latter. "You know, Martin, you're right about one thing," he said, his voice quieter, more sincere. "We are afraid, but I believe that even in this noise, there can be meaning. Let's talk about that, not for ratings, but for ourselves." Scorsese looked at him, and something shifted in his eyes, not anger, but curiosity. He nodded, but said nothing. The cameras kept rolling, but the studio fell into a heavy silence, as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Backstage, a producer whispered into Colbert's earpiece, "Stephen, this could be a disaster. Or a masterpiece. Don't lose him." Colbert nodded, though no one could see it. He felt he was standing on the edge of something bigger than just an interview. This was the moment where television could stop being crap or become it forever. When the cameras turned off and the hum of the spotlights faded, the CBS studio still pulsed with tension. The audience slowly dispersed, whispering among themselves. Some viewers, elderly couples in tidy sweaters, lingered near the exit, discussing Scorsese's words. "He's right. Television isn't what it used to be," said a woman with silver-bobbed hair to her husband. "But calling Colbert's show garbage? That's too much." Her husband, holding the show's program, just shook his head. "Wonder what happens next." Backstage, the atmosphere was even more tense. The show's producer, Allison, a woman with a sharp gaze and a tablet that never left her hands, intercepted Colbert the moment he stepped off stage. "Stephen, that was," she hesitated, searching for the word, "either brilliant or we just buried the ratings. Social media is exploding. Hashtag Scorsese versus Colbert is trending." Colbert took off his glasses and rubbed his temples. His trademark ease had vanished. "Allison, I don't know what that was. He just threw me off." He glanced toward the dressing room where Scorsese had disappeared. But you know what? He wasn't wrong. Not entirely. Allison raised an eyebrow. "You're serious? You mean to say you agree with him? After he called your show?" "Well, you heard him." Colbert sighed, his eyes drifting over cables and set pieces. "I'm not saying I agree, but I feel it. We're stuck. Jokes, applause, ads, all on cue. Maybe Martin's right. Maybe we're afraid to take risks." Allison scoffed, but her eyes betrayed curiosity. "So what are you proposing? Bring him back? Give him another chance to torch us on air?" Colbert smiled, for the first time that night, genuinely. "Maybe. But not to torch us. To talk. For real." Meanwhile, in the dressing room, Scorsese sat in front of the mirror, surrounded by bulbs. His fingers tapped nervously on the table. An untouched water bottle and an unopened script for the interview sat nearby. A knock on the door, and in walked his manager, Rita, a vibrant woman in her 60s who had been with him since Taxi Driver. "Martin, what the hell was that?" Her voice was a mix of alarm and admiration. "You called Colbert's show garbage. On national television. Twitter, sorry, X is on fire. Half the people are calling you a hero, the other half a grumpy old man." Scorsese shrugged, but his eyes stayed serious. "I said what I felt, Rita. I'm tired of the circus. They want me to come on, smile, and praise their format. But I see what's happening. They're afraid of the truth, all of them." Rita sat across from him, arms folded. "So what now? You realize those weren't just words. People expect a response. Colbert's probably already working on saving face. And you? You planning to fight or what?" Scorsese went quiet. He stared at his reflection, as if searching for answers in the wrinkles that told the story of his life. Then he spoke softly. "I don't want to fight, Rita. I want to be heard." The next morning, New York woke up to headlines. Scorsese destroys Colbert live on air. screamed the New York Post. Has television lost its soul? Pondered the Atlantic. In Brooklyn cafes and Connecticut suburbs, people over 55 who still remembered Johnny Carson's late-night shows debated passionately. Scorsese's right, said a man in a tweed blazer over espresso. It's all commerce now. His companion scoffed. But Colbert's trying. It's not his fault the world changed. At the CBS studio, Colbert's team went into crisis mode. Allison flipped through audience response reports. Older viewers, their key demographic, were split. Some thought Scorsese was rude. Others found him refreshingly honest. Younger audiences on X were making memes, but the older crowd wanted more. We can't just ignore this, Allison said in a meeting. People want us to respond. But how? Colbert, holding a cup of coffee, looked pensive. I want to bring him back, he said at last. Not for a fight. For a conversation. About television, about truth, about whatever he meant. The team froze. One of the writers, a young guy with a beard, chuckled nervously. You're seriously giving him another chance to call us garbage? Stephen, that's suicide. No, Colbert replied, his voice firming. It's a chance to do something real. If we're afraid of that, then Martin's right, we're just noise. An unexpected twist later that same day, Scorsese got a call from Colbert, not from a producer, not through a manager, but directly. Stephen's voice was quiet but steady. Martin, I don't want this to end in a scandal. You said what you felt, and I respect that. Come back. Let's talk not for ratings, but to understand each other. Scorsese, expecting anything but that, was stunned. He agreed, but on one condition. No script, no earpiece prompts. Colbert agreed. But when news of the second interview leaked online, something happened that no one anticipated. One of the most powerful media moguls in America, a billionaire whose corporation partially owned CBS, personally stepped in. His name was Edward Crowe, a 70-year-old media veteran known for his iron grip and hatred of public conflict. Crowe sent Colbert a short message. Cancel the interview. That's an order. Colbert, who had never liked corporate games, felt his face flush. He knew Crowe. The man funded the show, but rarely interfered directly. Why now? Why did one director provoke such a reaction? The answer came when Allison dug up an old story. In the 1980s, Crowe, then a young producer, had worked with Scorsese on a project that collapsed due to creative disagreements. Scorsese publicly accused Crowe of censorship. Crowe had never forgotten. Now the stakes were higher. Colbert was faced with a choice. Obey Crowe and protect the show, or risk everything to give Scorsese a voice. But behind the scenes, a new figure emerged, Megan, the young assistant director who had accidentally overheard the conversation about Crowe. She turned out not to be just an assistant, but a rookie journalist secretly working on an expose about media censorship. Megan approached Colbert after the meeting, holding a folder of documents. Stephen, I know you don't want to get involved, she said, her voice trembling. But I found something. Crowe doesn't just want to stop the interview. He's afraid Scorsese might expose his new project, a streaming platform that censors content to appease sponsors. Colbert looked at the documents, and his eyes widened. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a bomb that could change the entire media landscape. New York was awake. In Upper East Side coffee shops, suburban homes in Connecticut, and living rooms across America, people were discussing the scandal between Martin Scorsese and Stephen Colbert. Social media buzzed. Some called Scorsese a prophet who challenged the system. Others labeled him an old curmudgeon who had lost touch with reality. But for the audience over 55 who remembered Johnny Carson's Tonight Show and Scorsese's early films, this wasn't just a debate. It was a conversation about what had happened to their country and whether there was still room for truth in it. In the CBS studio, there was a silence before the storm. After Edward Crowe, the media mogul and shadow player, ordered the cancellation of Scorsese's second interview, Colbert found himself at a crossroads. The documents Megan, the young journalist assistant, had brought sat on his desk like an unarmed grenade. They contained evidence, Crow was preparing to launch a new streaming platform where algorithms would automatically censor content that could offend sponsors or political partners. Scorsese, with his reputation and bluntness, was a threat not only to Crow's image but to his empire. Colbert stood by the window of his dressing room, looking out at the lights of Manhattan. His show had been his life, years spent balancing humor and truth, trying not to cross the line. But now the line had come to him. "Stephen, you can't do this," said Allison, his producer, entering the room. Her voice was tense, but her eyes betrayed her worry. "If you invite Scorsese against Crow's will, it's over. Not just for the show, but for your career." Colbert turned, holding Megan's folder. "And if I don't, Allison? If I stay silent, knowing that Crow is suffocating the truth? Then what am I? What kind of person am I?" Allison sighed, sitting on the edge of the couch. "You think Scorsese will appreciate your heroism? He called your show crap, remember?" Colbert smiled, but the smile was bitter. Maybe he was right. Not in everything, but in something. We're so afraid of losing viewers that we forgot why we're doing this. He picked up the phone and dialed Scorsese's number. On the other end, Martin picked up after the second ring. "Stephen." His voice was raspy but calm. "I thought you'd changed your mind." "No, Martin. I want you to come. Tomorrow. But there's something you need to know." Colbert briefly explained about Crow and the documents. Scorsese was silent, but Colbert could hear him breathing slowly, as if considering each breath. "So, old Eddie is still holding everyone by the throat," Scorsese finally said. "I knew he hadn't forgotten that project from the 80s. But you know what, Stephen? I'm not surprised. This is the crap I was talking about." "Are you in the game?" Colbert asked. Scorsese laughed shortly, but genuinely. "I'm old, but I'm not dead. I'll come." The next evening at CBS was electric. The audience, feeling the tension, buzzed before the show began. Backstage, Megan nervously checked the copies of the documents she had handed Colbert. Allison, despite her doubts, organized everything to make the show look like a normal broadcast. But everyone on the team knew it wasn't. Crow didn't show up in person, but his presence was felt. CBS lawyers had been calling all day, hinting at serious consequences. When Scorsese walked into the studio, the audience erupted in applause. He looked just as he did last time, gray hair, dark suit, sharp gaze. But this time, there was a new confidence about him, as if he knew he was on the right side of history. Colbert greeted him with a warm smile, though his hands trembled ever so slightly. "Martin, glad you could make it," Stephen began as they sat down. "Last time let's just say, we stirred the nest a bit." The audience laughed, but Scorsese just nodded. "We told the truth, Stephen. Or at least we started." Colbert took a deep breath. This was the moment he had feared, and the one he had waited for. "Martin, you said television has lost its soul. But there are people who want it to lose even more. People who decide what we can see and what we can't." He placed the folder on the table. The room fell silent. Scorsese raised an eyebrow, but his eyes flashed with curiosity. "What's this?" he asked. "Evidence," Colbert replied. "Evidence that media companies, including those connected to this network, are planning to censor content. Not for morality's sake, but for money and power." The audience gasped. Backstage, Allison closed her eyes, whispering, "God, we're done." But Colbert continued, "I'm not saying we're perfect, Martin. My show is part of this system. But I believe we can be better. And I want us to talk about it openly, without fear." Scorsese glanced at the folder, then at Colbert. His face was unreadable, but there was warmth in his voice. "Stephen, I came here thinking you just wanted to save your reputation. But this," he placed his hand on the folder, "this is bold. I was wrong about you. Not entirely, but partially." The audience laughed, and the tension lifted slightly. Colbert felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. "So what do we do, Martin? How do we bring back television's soul?" Scorsese leaned forward, his voice soft but penetrating. "We tell stories. Not the ones that sell, but the ones that matter. about people, about struggle, about truth. And were not afraid of being shut down. They spoke for another half hour about censorship, about media, about how television could be more than noise, but a voice. The audience listened, breathless. Older viewers at home, who remembered the times when television united the nation, felt something long forgotten stir within them. Hope, climax, and open ending. But when the show ended, the consequences were immediate. Crow filed a lawsuit against CBS, accusing Colbert of defamation. But Megyn's documents, anonymously published in the New York Times, sparked a wave of investigations. Crow's streaming platform lost key investors, and his reputation took a hit. Yet Colbert didn't celebrate the victory. His show was under threat of cancellation, and he knew the fight wasn't over. Scorsese, returning to his apartment in Brooklyn, sat at his desk and began to write. Not a script, not an article, but a letter to Colbert. "Stephen," he wrote, "you reminded me why I started making films. Don't give up. We're not done yet." Megyn, whose article had become a sensation, received an offer from a major publication but turned it down. She stayed at CBS to help Colbert fight for the show. One evening, when the studio had emptied out, she found a note on her desk. "Thank you, M." She smiled, knowing who it was from. In the final scene, Colbert stood on the rooftop of the studio, looking out at the city. The wind smelled of asphalt and possibility. He didn't know if he'd save the show or if television would change. But he felt like he had taken the first step and that he wasn't alone.